Thanks for being with us here on Live Now from Fox. I'm your host, Christina Evans. We do want to continue to stay on top of these top stories and really this major news coming earlier today. I'm going to put this up on your screen there from the New York Times. They have it as breaking, but Representative Nancy Pelosi, the only female House Speaker, said that she would retire in 2027, ending a run as one of the most powerful women in U.S. politics. Of course, we do know that Nancy Pelosi was the first woman to serve as the Speaker of the House, the only at this point. She will not be running for re-election to Congress in 2026, ending the 4-decade career of her as a Democratic icon. We do want to continue on with this conversation now, bringing in there with Politico, Dustin Gardiner. Dustin, thanks so much for being with us here on Live Now from Fox. Many people were shocked to hear this news. Of course, we know that we had been watching her movements for quite some time, trying to understand what she might do at this point. She's 85 years old. What was your reaction to hearing the news that she's not going to run for re-election?
You know, this has been really building up for a long time. I think a lot of people in San Francisco, I'm based in the city here, and there was an expectation that she might be heading this direction. But Nancy Pelosi is one of those politicians that's very good at keeping her cards close to her vest. So really just a handful of people, maybe even fewer than 10 people, knew for sure if she was going to retire or not. And it's been several cycles where we thought she might retire and she didn't. So we really just didn't know until the last minute this morning. And as I reported for Politico today, we actually have found out that she had 2 videos recorded, one retirement video and then one saying that she would run again. And she did that to sort of keep people guessing about what she was going to do. So really just kind of the ultimate tactician through the end.
And so, of course, we know that over the years, Nancy has had such an impact on this building in particular, taking a live look there at the U.S. Capitol. When it comes to her legacy, Dustin, what are some of the things that you'd even like to bring to the forefront? Of course, we know that she's the first woman and the only woman at this point to be the Speaker of the House. But what else has she really done that's defined her 4-decade-long career there in Washington?
From a legislative perspective, the first thing that always comes to mind is the Affordable Care Act, working with President Obama and the very thin Democratic majority to push that through the House. That has been her crowning achievement, and that's one of the things that has actually kept her on Capitol Hill for a lot of these years, wanting to defend that. So that really jumps out. But then there's a whole host of legislation, whether it's treatment and research related to HIV and AIDS, whether it's funding for children's nutrition programs. She really just, championed a host of causes over her years. And the other thing I think she'll really be remembered for is the power struggle that she led with President Donald Trump. She was the Speaker of the House twice, and her second stint, a lot of that time was spent fighting the president over his policies. She led the 2 impeachment votes against President Donald Trump. And so I think healthcare and fighting with President Trump are really sort of the 2 pillars of her career as Speaker.
And so, Dustin, as we're continuing this conversation, another impact, and really it kind of ties into everything we've seen so far this week with those major elections happening all over the country. I have to ask you, when it comes to her position within the party, of course, we know that there have been some people who feel like the party should move younger at this point and wanting new leadership, and that's sort of reflected in Zohran Mamdani's win there in New York City. How do you think that the newer age of politics has also played a role in her deciding to step back?
Yeah, I mean, I think as she was making her decision, that national conversation about a gerontocracy and this sort of intergenerational split within the Democratic Party between an older guard and younger candidates wanting the opportunity to come up, that has been really front and center in San Francisco. And even if Nancy Pelosi decided to run again, she had at least 2 very prominent primary challengers that she would have faced. And I think that just sort of speaks to that conversation about age, and she would have had to navigate that, and that would have been difficult. And a lot of Nancy Pelosi's allies, her lieutenants or contemporaries, these people, most of them have already retired, or a lot of them are in position to retire in the near future here. And so I think that had to have factored into her decision. But, as I've talked to her sort of supporters and allies, really the thing people say is that she was just ready. I mean, it's been almost 40 years. This term will end at 39 years. And I think a lot of people just think she had done the work and just didn't really have the drive to go for another term.
I want to put this up on the screen as we're continuing the conversation. This is a statement from former President Biden on her retirement saying, quote, "I often said Nancy Pelosi was the best Speaker of the House in American history. It's why I awarded her the Presidential Medal of Freedom. When I was president, we worked together to grow our economy, create millions of jobs, and make historic investments in our nation's future. She has devoted much of her life to this country, and America will always be grateful. Jill and I wish Nancy and Paul all the best." Summing it up there, I think it's interesting to bring this into the conversation as we even have had some insight into how her role, the role that she played last year when having Biden step out of the race and having Kamala Harris go forward as the new nominee. Can you sort of speak to their relationship and what it really looks like overall?
The relationship between Nancy Pelosi and the Bidens, not just Joe Biden, the whole Biden family, it's been strained for the last couple of years. And he put out a very nice statement today. But the reality is there were a lot of hurt feelings after the 2024 presidential race. And Nancy Pelosi and her allies and top lieutenants on the Hill, people like Adam Schiff and Zoe Lofgren, these are the people that really led the campaign within the Democratic Party to call on President Biden to step down after his, very bad debate performance in June of 2024. And I think without Nancy Pelosi, there's really an open question of whether there would have been the momentum within the party to push Joe Biden to step down. And I think as time has gone by and more revelations have come out about the Biden White House, Nancy Pelosi's position has looked better historically, especially knowing that she did face some blowback within her own party for putting that pressure on President Biden. But it also just really speaks to the power that she's continued to have within the Democratic Party, even after she left her leadership role and after she stepped down and lost the speakership. She has continued to be a chief architect and tactician within the Democratic Party. And the fact that, several years after leaving leadership, she was able to play that central role, that really just speaks to the influence she has far beyond San Francisco.
And Dustin, it wasn't just former President Biden who spoke out. Former President Barack Obama, who you mentioned, one of her biggest achievements was working with him on the Affordable Care Act. He said on his X account, for almost 4 decades, Nancy Pelosi has served the American people and worked to make our country better. No one was more skilled at bringing people together and getting legislation passed. And I will always be grateful for her support of the Affordable Care Act. She made us proud to be Democrats and will go down in history as one of the best speakers of the House of Representatives has ever had. Nancy, thank you for your leadership and your friendship. Michelle and I wish you and Paul the best in this next chapter. But without only showing former President Barack Obama's, also want to put up there the statement that we saw from his Truth Social account from President Trump. We have it here from Fox News with him saying that Trump tells Peter Dustin that Pelosi's retirement is, quote, a great thing for America, calling former House Speaker evil and corrupt. Really differentiating reactions to Pelosi's. Yeah. It's not like we were expecting any sort of extremely positive statement from President Trump there, but going as far to call her evil and corrupt, does that sort of talk about her commitment to some of the Democrats' side of things to get this reaction from the Republican president?
Well, the feeling between Trump and Pelosi is certainly mutual. It was just a couple of days ago, earlier this week, she did an interview in San Francisco where she called him vile. And, I think she said he's, one of the worst people on earth, something to that effect. And so he sort of matched that tone today. And really, this is nothing new. The two of them have been trading barbs for many, many years. And so I wasn't surprised that the president wouldn't have nice things to say when she's announcing that she's not going to run again. And, as I mentioned earlier, she led the 2 impeachment votes against him. And he said today that he was proud of those impeachments, even knowing that he didn't get removed by the Senate. But it's just, there was really a years-long power struggle between the two of them. And when she was speaker, and she really led the Democratic resistance back then to President Trump. And even, in her post-leadership era, she's made fighting Trump the centerpiece of a lot of the campaigning that she's doing. And I think a lot of people think that part of the reason that she's stuck around as long as she has, she's 85 years old, and part of it has been to fight Trump. And, she really pushed very hard to try to prevent Trump Trump from returning to the White House. And now that he is back in power, she's led multiple campaigns, including raising tens of millions of dollars in support of California's redistricting gerrymandering plan that voters approved this last week. And this is really all about Nancy Pelosi and Donald Trump struggling for power and control of the country. And even though her stature is diminished and she's not in center stage as speaker, she's very much doing everything she can to still kind of wage that conflict with him from San Francisco.
Of course, we know that's a major piece of what happened there with Gavin Newsom in the state, as Proposition 50 did make it over the line. Dustin, before I let you go, the last thing I want to show you is this live vantage point that we have over the San Francisco Bay. This is a camera from Oakland, but looking out over the San Francisco Bay. The question now remains, who is going to fill these shoes? Nancy Pelosi, of course, being the heavyweight in politics that she has been for the last 40 years. Who can step up to the plate to fill her seat in this district? Do we know who are some of those front runners?
Yeah. I mean, no, it's a really big void to fill locally. I mean, so much of what you were just showing, so much of the city skyline and the freeway system and the bridges and all these things are things that Nancy Pelosi helped build and get funding for. And, things like the Presidio Park next to the Golden Gate Bridge. Her legacy, her stamp is really everywhere here. But there are several challengers. We have State Senator Scott Wiener, who's a very prominent Democrat. We also have Saikat Chakrabarti, who's a wealthy former tech executive and also a former chief of staff to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the congressperson from New York. The two of them are sort of competing for kind of the tech-leaning moderate lane of San Francisco Democrats, and then the more progressive end of the city. The two of them, they're Democrats, but they're sort of more moderate for San Francisco standards. And then the left and more union-aligned portion of the city hasn't found a candidate yet. And so we're hearing a variety of names being floated. One of them is City Supervisor Connie Chan. She's talked about maybe wanting to run, and she would most likely be the person that Pelosi would probably support in this current field. But from what I'm hearing, Pelosi is going to wait and see how the field shapes up before she makes any decision about who she might want as a successor.
And so, of course, looking back at some of this video footage that she released herself as a part of her statement and decision to step back, you can just see how long she's been there in Congress advocating for those in her district. And so, of course, wanted to make sure that we had that conversation, as Nancy Pelosi, the former Speaker of the House, has now decided that she will be stepping back. She's going to be there with her husband, Paul. Anything else that we know about their future plans? I know that it's not been an easy few years for them with some of the attacks that happened on Paul, of course, a number of years ago. But do we know anything else about what her future plans are?
I mean, all her allies that I'm talking to today are really saying that even though she's leaving office after next year, they don't expect her to fade from the scene. She's known as one of the most prolific Democratic fundraisers in history. She's very connected to the National Party and candidates throughout the country. So I think she'll remain pretty involved, even though she's not running again. I think she'll be at the center of a lot of discussions about the direction of the party, and she'll remain an ATM for Democrats coming through San Francisco and the Bay Area wanting to tap into the wealth here as they try to fund their campaigns.
So we certainly appreciate with Politico, Dustin Gardiner, for having this conversation, breaking down the very latest. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, wanted to make sure we brought that to you here on Live Now from Fox. Also want to put this up on your screen. This is also some reaction we have here from Hakeem Jeffries. Of course, he is the minority leader there of the House. He put out an entire letter saying Nancy Pelosi is an iconic, heroic, trailblazing, legendary, and transformative leader. She is the greatest speaker of all time. The United States is a much better nation today because Nancy Pelosi dedicated her life to serving the children, the climate, the country, and the American people. Nancy Pelosi's legendary public service journey has taken her from Charm City to the great state of California to international capitals around the globe. Guiding her life's work has always been her strong faith, tremendous patriotism, and belief that we have a republic worth keeping. For the children, as she often says, Speaker Pelosi has lived out the bedrock Jesuit value of working for greater good. From her early groundbreaking advocacy against the Chinese Communist Party and relentless support for AIDS research to her work on the Intelligence Committee and the 9/11 Commission, Nancy Pelosi has always put her country first. So those are the words there from Hakeem Jeffries, of course, speaking out as Nancy Pelosi, the former speaker, has now decided that she will not be running for re-election. Want to put this up on your screen as well here. Live look over the Bay Area. We'll continue to follow the very latest if we're able to get any insight into really what truly does come next. As we heard there from Dustin, a few names are being thrown out there in that conversation about who could fill this seat. Of course, that'll be a storyline we follow here on Live Now from Fox.